All right, fam. So I'm out here literally touching grass at the moment because I figured I would take nap time while the kids are down and I'm on vacation to talk about some of the stuff going down after Highguard dropped. Because as you guys, I'm sure, are aware, I really like talking about video games at length. And even though I'm on vacation, I love talking about games. Like, it's how I relax. I genuinely love it. So I snuck away during nap time and I figured I would just ramble a little bit to a captive audience, you know? It's somewhat poetic when you think about it. But I wanted to go through this. So Jacob's going to help me out, put some B-roll on screen so that you're not just looking at my ugly mug the whole time I'm rambling. And yeah, I want to get some stuff out in the open. So as I'm sure you guys are all aware, the game launched a couple of days ago to 97,000 concurrent players on Steam, even more on console. And I predicted 100K on Steam, and so I was close but no cigar. But I mainly was predicting that based off of sheer morbid curiosity, people wanting to just give it a shot and see, what is this game? Like, what even is it? And sure enough, a lot of people decided to try it. They just found it wanting. And we'll circle back to this a little bit later because a lot of people tried it for an hour and then moved on and said, it's not for me, it's not ready. Maybe it is eventually for me, but right now it's just not where it needs to be. And so they moved on. But at the very least, people tried it. And after trying it, the general consensus seems to be that there's some interesting ideas, there's some compelling things going on, but it's just not ready. Like, there's one game mode, it's 3v3, which just feels kind of weird for how big the maps are. A lot of the like sweaty elements, it's kind of designed to be a sweaty game, but a lot of the sweaty, like for example, control settings are not sweaty. So like, there's apparently built-in mouse acceleration, which you just like can't turn off. Apparently, there's mouse smoothing, not mouth smoothing, mouse smoothing, which is built in as well. Like, there's just weird stuff like that. Shroud of all people was saying that it's really hard to aim and control where you're shooting in this game. And if Shroud is having trouble aiming in your game, something's off, you know? So I think the general consensus is that this could end up being really cool and a nice, maybe not like mainstream shooter, but you know, a competitive one that has an audience. It's just not quite there yet. And personally for me, I just find it like, I admire the desire to shadow drop something, but when you want to shadow drop, or in this case, dimly lit drop something, you've got to have it 110% of the way there, like Apex was. You can't afford to have performance issues, server issues, because if ever anybody comes to you and says, hey, you should have taken another month or 6 months or a year, you have no defense because you chose to shadow drop it. You know, when you choose to do that, you don't get to then complain that people have unrealistic expectations for how finished it is, you know? But either way, I think it could eventually be good if they were to add, for example, an arenas mode, just like Apex had, where it's 3v3 small maps and it's just about gunplay. I could legitimately see getting into that because I loved Apex Arenas, for example, but it doesn't have that right now. So maybe eventually I get into it, but as of right now, I'm good. And over the last few days, the player count has steadily dwindled further and further. The memes have exploded, you know, people demanding apologies now from Jeff, stuff like that. But what I wanted to talk about here was the broader aftermath, because I've noticed something really bizarre that did kick up around Concord as well. And it's this like mainstream journalist wing of the gaming industry, the games media, that is growing increasingly contemptuous towards the average gamer. We've seen it in posts where they say like the internet is sick and divisive, and like, sure, the internet is divisive by its very nature. People get into their little tribalistic groups, agree and disagree, fight back and forth, but ultimately it brings people together and it gives you a glance into what the average gamer thinks much more quickly and dynamically than something would have been visible like 20 years ago, when most of gaming media was dictated by journalists in big magazine operations and stuff like that. But what we've seen is this, like, if you thought Concord or Highguard or Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League or any of those games, if you thought they looked kind of mid and uninteresting at the announcement, and so you downvoted the trailer and you said, this looks mid, this looks lame, and it sucks. If you vocalize that you were rooting for the game's downfall and you're part of a sick gaming culture, and there's been even implications from like Sven from Larian suggesting that there's a bunch of game reviewers and people that are not fans of Highguard that shouldn't have their like review credentials on the same level as others, that you should have a Metacritic score for individual reviewers so that games companies can downvote reviewers that they think are too hard to deal with or whatever. and therefore you can, like, I guess control the review scores or penalize the score or rebalance the score based on people's reputation. It's very interesting, and I think that a lot of this is borne out on one hand off of like what I think is kind of fair. I think it is fair to say that some people absolutely just have hate boners for games, and no matter what will rage against it. And we saw that with Assassin's Creed Shadows. We saw that with Ghost of Yotei. We've seen that with plenty of games, where there's certainly a subset of gaming journalism or maybe just YouTubers and streamers, the culture warrior types, where it's not what I would consider to be good faith critiques. Like, even if the game comes out and is really good, they will still find something to be upset about, right? But I think what's happening is that there's a conflation going on, because there are people like that, maybe 4 of them, and nobody really takes them that seriously, okay? Like, the average gamer for Highguard, they just didn't think it looked very good. They tried the game when it launched, and they didn't find it that compelling. After an hour, they said, I'm good. And they moved on. And they might have left even a bad review because they were like, hey, I can't even get in a match, so I'm going to rate this negatively because I can't even load into a match, or because it keeps crashing and kicking me out of teams and stuff like that. They gave a review based on their experience, in other words, which is what reviews are for. But what we're seeing now is that people are swinging the other way. And I think part of it is because the developers, I think it's Wildlight, they put together Highguard, and they are a team of established veterans who have a lot of friends in the industry, a lot of friends in journalism. They even said that they were very close with Jeff, which is part of the reason they got the slot at the Game Awards that they did, presumably because they're friends with him, and he wanted to put it on the main stage and do it the way that he did it, because he truly believed in them. They were friends and buddies, but I think that that's part of the reason you're seeing the reaction for Highguard specifically that you don't see for other games like Splitgate 2. Splitgate 2 is another FPS that launched. By all accounts, it's like a pretty solid game, over monetized, but it's pretty solid and fine. It's just not mainstream. It's not remarkable. It's not an Arc Raiders. It's not a Call of Duty. Like, it's just not any of those things, right? But I think the reason you're seeing this reaction for Highguard specifically is because of those connections that a lot of the developers and the studio people have with the game's media. And what I cannot stand is this insinuation that if you didn't like Highguard, or if you said it was bad, or if you said, yeah, the marketing for this was stupid, that there's something wrong with you, or that you are like a fake fan, or you are like bad for the industry or whatever. Like, there was this tweet, I quote tweeted, I'll have Jacob put it on screen here, but it was this article written by a site, to be fair, I hadn't heard of before, so maybe they do otherwise really good stuff. I genuinely am not sure. But this article, if you read the full thing, it's effectively not even insinuating, it's just downright claiming that Highguard, in a perfect world where people were not critical on the internet and were not starting looking at the trailer negatively, that it would have found success, and that we angry gamers killed it unfairly, right? And I just replied to it and I said, I mean, I don't think it's that deep. Like, it just didn't show well in its initial trailer. And then when we tried it, when people played it at launch, it wasn't good enough at all to justify the hype or the excitement. It didn't change hardly anybody's mind about it. And so it just, like, it didn't do well. It's just not that deep. It's not that complicated. But I think that there's this desire, certainly by devs, which I can empathize with, which is that you work hard on a project for years and years and years. You want eventually for that game to come out and be successful. And every developer would hope that their game is successful. Nobody sets out trying to make a bad game. Nobody's claiming they do. But at the end of the day, you're trying to create a product. And that's what's weird about gaming, is it's a melding of art and tech. You're building a piece of art, but you're also building a product to sell to people, And I feel like that's a piece that sometimes the dev teams lose sight of. And then other companies, that's all they consider. They kind of forget the artistic part, and it just becomes purely business. But it's really fascinating to me to see now, like, pretty well-established developers trying to now curtail criticism and critiques when it's not convenient, or when they feel like people aren't reviewing it properly. It's just really bizarre to me. And you see a bandwagoning effect of a lot of the other kind of industry insider types who are acting as though they're like high and mighty, or like they're better for the industry. They're the real fans of the industry, because they did not say Highguard looked bad. They did not mention that the reveal was mid, or that maybe Jeff overhyped it. They didn't say anything like that. And they think Highguard's really good, which makes them better. It's just so stupid, because it's trying to make a mountain out of a molehill. I think Highguard's story is one that's pretty simple, actually. I think it's just straightforwardly a case of a game that wasn't that remarkable, that was pitched as literally a new breed of shooter, was nowhere near good enough to justify the hype it received, mainly from Jeff and Jeff's circle. And as a result, people tried it, demonstrably so. Hundreds of thousands of players, if not millions, I don't know, but hundreds of thousands at the very least, loaded in and tried it and didn't like it. And so they uninstalled it. They left a negative review because their experience was negative, hence they're leaving. And that's that. It's not this big problem of like, the industry is sick. No, the reveal was bad. The trailer was bad, okay? What do you want people to do? Like, this is what's so bizarre to me. Like, play it through. What are you actually suggesting? Are you suggesting that the trailer was actually really good? Is that what you're saying? The reveal at the Game Awards was really good and it was the right place to reveal that? I don't know if you want to say that, because then you're telling millions of people that they're crazy and that they didn't see what they saw. And that gaslighting gamers is a bad idea, man. That's a bad idea. So are you really going to claim that? You're going to claim that we're all delusional and that trailer was actually really good and explained exactly what the game was and it looked really good? Because it didn't. It just wasn't a very good trailer. And actually, the CEO of the company behind Highguard, it did a piece with, I believe, Kotaku. And it was in that review or interview that he mentioned that he knew Jeff and how originally they were going to shadow drop it on January 26th. But Jeff convinced them not to. And Jeff was like, let me try something at the Game Awards, which is all the funnier because of how it turned out. But that is suggested why the trailer wasn't as good as it could have been, because they basically threw it together quickly based on Jeff's suggestion. And so even they would, I think, acknowledge the trailer wasn't particularly good. But because of their no media marketing strategy, there was nothing to follow it up with or to explain what the game even was. It just was what it was. And we were left to just analyze and look at an otherwise totally mediocre trailer. And as I've said 1,000 times, if the show put the game halfway through or a quarter of the way through the show, I don't think anybody would have been talking about Highguard the day after it was revealed. And then it would have shadow dropped and maybe a few thousand people would have tried it. And it might have been able to slowly build up in popularity, over time with updates and stuff like that. But because of how it was framed as a phenomenal accomplishment, a new breed of shooter, something revolutionary, people were like, okay, I'm going to try it. And if it's not, I'm going to be pissed. I'm going to be pissed. And you can't blame them for being pissed because like you pissed on our back and told us it was raining, And I think like with all of this, there's a couple of aspects to it, which I can totally empathize with and respect. I think Jeff genuinely thought the game looked good and was fun. I think he genuinely thought that. People have suggested that, he actually owns the company that's developing the game. That's why he's promoting it. He said categorically he does not have any stake in the company. It's a little funny he had to come out and clarify that, but he did. So he does not own any stake in the company. I think he just genuinely liked the game and he believed in it and tried to promote it as best he could. Respect. If the game ended up being really good, we'd all be praising him and thanking him for that, right? So I don't want to say that he shouldn't promote or praise games that he likes. That's his prerogative. It's his right. He has a platform and he chose to do this. It seems like he put a lot of chips on the wrong square. He put all of his eggs in a basket that had holes in it, it seems. Now that we've played the game and as the player counts dropped, it seems like most players are agreeing with the sentiment that we expressed back when it was first dropped. But at the outset, I just want to say, I think Jeff was very candid and straightforward in his belief in the game, and he really liked it, believed in it, tried to promote it. It just turns out that the average gamer disagreed with the quality of it, right? The second piece of this, though, is people saying or expressing frustration, like the industry core people expressing frustration over negativity in the gaming space. And this is where I asked, just play it out. Are you asking for us to suggest that the trailer was really good? Because it wasn't. I think even the CEO of the developer would say it wasn't a very good trailer. So are we supposed to just pretend like it wasn't? The other suggestion has been that back in the day, if a trailer or a game wasn't for me, I just would move on and look at stuff I did like. I wouldn't dwell on it. Okay, but if that game was being framed as a new breed of shooter, as the next big thing in gaming, if it was put in the most coveted and important trailer reveal spot at the Game Awards, the biggest night in gaming, if it was put there, you'd probably be like, okay, well, I'm actually going to keep an eye on this because all of these people within the show, within the marketing, everything, they're saying this is going to be the next big thing. They're saying this is a new breed of shooter from the Apex guys, from Respawn. Surely they're not out of touch. Surely they're right, right? So I think even that's kind of frankly stupid. It's ignoring key parts of the like what happened, key parts of the situation, which is just frankly that it was framed as a new breed, as something phenomenal, and it wasn't. People played it and didn't find it to be the case. Jeff has a massive platform. He promoted it, saying that we would all be owing him an apology. That just stirred the pot of hype even more, or maybe intrigue, maybe not hype, but intrigue. So people tried it and they just disagreed with the sentiment from some of the people that went out to the event in Los Angeles and said that the game was really good. And they just disagreed. And they left a review that was negative on Steam because their experience was negative. But one of the other things to close this out that's been really fascinating is a suggestion that people looked at the Steam reviews and they said if you filter and sift through the Steam reviews, you can actually filter it based on playtime. So you can actually filter 1 hour played or less than an hour played, like 1 to 5 hours played, and then like 5+ hours played. So when you filter all of that out, you can see, and they'll point to this on Twitter. They'll be like, see, so when you go to 5+ hours played, it's 74% positive. But if you only look at sub 1 hour reviews, then it's like 90% negative, right? And this is supposed to be some sort of gotcha. But I'm like, how is this a gotcha? If you play a game and you don't like it, are you going to play 5 hours of that game, especially if it's free to play and you can just uninstall it because you didn't lose any money? Like, probably not. It's like, yeah, so people that didn't like the game and reviewed it negatively. But people that did like the game and played 5 hours, they liked the game. Yeah, no duh, genius. Like, is the suggestion that you should only have reviews from the most hardcore fanboys of that franchise, or are reviews supposed to be more broadly looked at across everything? And I think that this is also, complaints over the Steam reviews should be looked at again through the lens of everything with regard to Highguard, which is that it was so overhyped as the next big thing. And if you were critical of it, if you thought the trailer was bad, if you thought that the reveal was poor, if you thought all this stuff, that something was wrong with you and that you were being a hater, when it just didn't look that good, man. Like, it just didn't. From the moment it was revealed, we didn't think it looked that good, which is why our reaction was the way that it was. It's why so many millions of people had the exact same feeling of, what is Jeff talking about? Like, what do you mean? What? Why is this the final reveal? Like, we were all kind of shocked and confused by it because it just wasn't that good and it didn't seem that remarkable. And again, I've brought up in the last few videos the example of Evolve. Evolve was that game that was supposed to be the next big thing back in 2014. It was overhyped. It won all sorts of hyped awards at E3. It was supposed to be the next big thing. And a lot of gaming journalists hung their hats on the hook that was Evolve, that it was going to be the next big thing. And then the average gamer got their hands on it and was like, this sucks. There's one monster and a bunch of players chasing and hunting the monster, and the monster is faster than players, so it can just outrun players. So the whole game just turns into the monster running in a circle around the map while the players chase him and never catch him. Like, it was just bad. And then they filled it with all these crazy over monetized skins and stuff. And it ended up failing and flopping. And it makes sense when you look back on it through the lens of like your average gamer, not through the lens of like a press content creator media event or something, where things have been set up very specifically for them to enjoy it and to have the best possible experience. And when you review and look at live service games, or really any game, it's important to look at it through the lens of the people that will actually make up 99% of the player base, not just the most hardcore journalists that are obsessed with being hyper positive. Because I think that what the whole Highguard debacle, not to be sensational about it, but the debacle has shown me is just that within a lot of games media, critical evaluation is viewed as taboo. It's viewed as like being a hater. It's viewed as not appreciating the work and labor that goes into game development, which I don't think is what it should be. There are absolutely haters out there, but I think that's 0.1% of the actual people that tried Highguard. I think most people booted up and wanted to see what all the fuss was about, and were open to being impressed. The game just wasn't that good. It's not bad or unethical to be critical, and it's not bad to be unimpressed by something and to not like it. I don't find it virtuous or impressive when somebody tells me they like every single thing under the sun. Like, cool, good for you. You probably are going to be happier throughout life than I am, but I'm not going to lie to myself and pretend like this was actually amazing and then it was just the haters on Twitter that caused it to fail. It's not that simple, you know, it's just not. The whole thing has been fascinating to watch and fascinating to see. And, you know, in 6 months, I don't think any of us are going to be talking about Highguard anymore, which is exactly the point. But I do just find it so utterly fascinating how all of this has gone down, and the framing by so many to act as though this is like some sort of serious reveal of a sick industry. Because I just don't see it that way, man. I just don't see it that way. I think this is a sign that the industry, and I think games media, is actually in a fascinating spot, you know? Because the way I see it is that in years past, Highguard would have been hyped up just like Evolve was, and they would have charged full price for it. It would have been a $60 game, you know, and it would have been pushed the way that that game was. But because of where we are now, a lot more people see through the marketing stuff. They see through the confusing statements. They see through the hype way more so than they used to. And I think that's why a lot of people in games media and games journalism are anxious and worried about all of this right now, because if Highguard, with the Game Awards machine behind it and all of these other people and TikTokers and streamers and YouTubers that they flew out to Los Angeles, if they couldn't hype it up and sell it to people, it's just, it doesn't matter how much you brute force it, you know, people are just going to see through it. It's why I stress so often in these videos and in my main channel videos and everything that you should think critically and evaluate things for yourself. Don't just like blindly follow what Luke says. Chances are you're going to disagree with stuff I say, and that's awesome. That's great, as long as you have reasons for it. That's all I ask, is that like you can come to your own conclusions and that you don't just blindly buy into the hype, because hype makes you stupid. It puts blinders up, so you start to ignore readily apparent and evident things, such as the lack of gameplay details, such as the lack of anything, frankly, for Highguard. And the same is going to be true for games in the future over the next like few years. There's going to be more games where this is going to be the same narrative and it's going to be framed the same way. I think most of the time you should not root for a game's demise. Maybe there's some in a hypothetical sense where it's put together by some sort of crazy psychopath and he's raising money to massacre kittens or something, so that game should fail. But the vast majority of games should not be rooted for to fail. But I think the reason why Highguard was looked at so critically is not because people just hate to like games. They like good games. We've seen the narrative around Marathon even starting to turn around. The real reason Highguard suffered and struggled so much in the lead up to its launch and in the launch itself was because of how the developers chose to go about it. They chose to not market it at all, and then they were frustrated that people only were talking about the bad trailer that they got and how confused everybody was. And then when the game actually launched, it wasn't ready for prime time. It wasn't particularly good, and so people gave up on it. That's not the player's fault, and players shouldn't feel bad about that. It doesn't make you a hater. It doesn't make you overly critical or toxic or anything. It just means that you, I think, are fairly evaluating a game that was poorly marketed and sold to people, and that also at the same time was not ready for prime time, which makes it all the more confusing and kind of ridiculous. So here we are. Again, if Highguard ends up adding an arenas mode, I could see getting into it, but until then, there's just not much reason for somebody like me to play it, and it seems like most other people are getting to the point where they're just ready to kind of move on and try something different, which we should have a lot of. We should have frickin' Marathon in about a month and a half, about a month. So who knows, maybe that ends up being phenomenal. I do think that one stands a much better chance than Highguard did, and I think it's looking better and better, so I can't wait to see what that's like. I'm excited. So anyway, I've been rambling for a while. It's Jesus, we're at like 25 minutes or something for this. So I appreciate you guys chilling with me. Again, I am on vacation having a great time, but I just love talking about games. And when I don't get to do it for a few days because I'm on vacation with people that don't really care about games the way I do, I kind of go stir crazy. So I just had to ramble a little bit, but there you go. Thank you, Jacob, for cutting this together and putting some B-roll on. Thank you guys for chilling with me, touching grass while my pale skin gets a little bit of vitamin D from the Florida sun, he says as he sits in the shade. I appreciate you guys. Much love. I'll be back early, over the weekend, so I'll be back for next week to rock and roll. We actually should have some interesting info to share about Crimson Desert when I get back. Something pretty cool is in the works over there, so I can't wait to share that with you guys. But until next time, my friends, much love. Can't wait to stream again and see you guys. I'll see you soon. Hugs and kisses. Bye-bye. took my thing.